$10 for general admission, $12 for reserved. It's a soul-stirring, hand-clapping good time. Tickets are also available at Bart's CD Cellar at 1015 Pearl Street here in Boulder. Call 447-8150, or for tickets, call 440-7666. Sponsored by Wild Oats, Alfalfa, Peaberries, etc. So, also sponsored by KGNU and the Boulder Weekly. Up next is Antithesis, political commentary by Rich and Leo. KGNU Boulder.
Good afternoon and welcome to Antithesis.
Antithesis is a weekly radio soiree of stimulating commentary and entertaining conversation discussing issues of importance in our daily lives.
Antithesis airs Sunday afternoon at 5:30.
I'm Richard Curtis.
I'm Leo Griep-Ruiz.
The opinions expressed on Antithesis are the opinions of the person speaking them,
and do not necessarily represent the views of the board, staff, or management of KGNU or of us here at Antithesis.
Because I might not agree with him.
And I might not agree with him.
The line between illegal and immoral. What kind of society have we become? The latest news out of New York City is that the deaf-mute people seen frequenting subway trains selling trinkets or begging were actually slave labor for some demented individuals who figured they could take advantage of these handicapped people because they, the slave labor, had been illegally smuggled into this country and would be unable or unwilling to approach the police. This last estimation proved to be incorrect, as a few of these poor people got up enough courage to challenge the reality in which they found themselves. Who would do such a thing? In this case, take would-be immigrants, who not only do not speak the language, but cannot speak at all, pack them into a couple of small apartments, and then send them out each day to scrape a few dollars together to enrich the capitalist. Mayor Giuliani may not put it this way, but that's the truth, isn't it? Some cruel bastard got some money together, capital, which enabled him or them to bring these immigrants to New York City, invest in some trinkets and a couple of apartments, and then sit back and watch the money roll in. Admittedly, it's not the best investment scheme, but it is the essence of capitalism. According to the head of the New York City Red Cross, which immediately took the immigrants in, the Red Cross intervenes in cases such as this 2 to 3 times a month. When asked by Pacifica Radio if having 57 immigrants cramped into unfit housing, working as slaves, was unique, the guy from the Red Cross simply said, no. What is unique is that the city has postured itself as a champion of the downtrodden that will bring the villains responsible to justice. The city of New York has not said why it ignores the 30 or more other cases each year. We might assume that the international media, which broke the story first, had a role. Around the world, people have been outraged that deaf-mute people in particular would be exploited this way. I hope that you also have found this incident shocking and disturbing. The state of our nation has been in decline for some time, and I doubt if we've made it all the way to the bottom yet, but things have already gotten seriously ugly out there. The greed, selfishness, and cruelty are exploding, which you already knew. What interests me about all of this is the question of where the line is, the line between acceptable and outrageous. It isn't a fixed line because different people have different standards. I have this friend who works in an office. He's on salary and is forced to work 50 to 60 hours a week, with a great deal of responsibility and stress. Because of the level of his salary and the local cost of housing, my friend lives in cramped accommodations with others in similar circumstances. This friend has no other options, in part because of the impossibility of changing medical insurance companies. So, he must work in this job and must tolerate his living conditions. If one works at a job and is not free to change, then is one a slave? Is the issue one of freedom or compensation? After all, even slaves are compensated in the sense that they are kept alive, and so is my friend, but neither can leave their job. To my way of thinking, the situation I described above and hundreds of millions like it are all unacceptable because of the exploitation and suffering endured so that the individuals in question can barely survive, such that someone else gets rich. But what determines whether or not a particular capitalist arrangement is officially acceptable or not? In New York, it would appear that simply holding immigrants in bonded labor stored in unfit housing is not unacceptable because the legal authorities choose not to do anything. The Red Cross gets involved, but has no authority over what cases are prosecuted. All working people live in this borderline between illegal and immoral. The situations in which we work are not moral, in that one individual, the owner, cannot ethically dominate others, which is the essence of capitalism, yet these situations are legal, usually. And even when they're not legal, abuses by capitalists are just part of life in America today. Even the police and district attorneys won't help. So, where is the line? Is it okay to keep able-bodied non-immigrants in virtual slavery because they are free on the occasional weekend, but not okay if they're handicapped? Is it slavery if a person works but does not make enough to pay for shelter, food, and clothing? What if this person is free to work a second job every weekend? Where is the line between immoral and illegal?
So, that's what you want to talk about.
Well, I hope so. We have to talk about something.
The line, you want to ask, you think that, like it's just a kind of a nebulous thing, the line between immoral and illegal?
Yes. Not between moral and immoral, or legal and illegal, but between illegal and immoral. Which I found an interesting point of reflection.
Just that's like just because something is logical doesn't mean it makes sense.
I suppose it's sort of like that.
Well, of course there's...
Well, actually, I want to talk about just the reaction around the world to these deaf-mute people being discovered, which I think is also interesting.
Yeah.
That having come up very recently.
I mean, they didn't...
The outrage.
Well, because, I mean, deaf and mute people have themselves been outraged for a long time. You know, there are people within the disabled community who feel that, like, you know, deaf folks, for example, going around selling those little cards,
right,
are bailing out.
Ah.
You see, and not doing what many other people who are also deaf are doing, which is to lead, you know, productive lives within the mainstream, which then could be argued from a certain political perspective as giving your power to the one who wants to dominate you.
In a sense. You know, that issue comes up occasionally on the show that is on before us.
Mm-hmm.
Disability Radio Worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed in listening to that one of the themes that comes across is this sense that people should have a right to meaningful and productive work.
Yeah, I think the issue you've raised is, of course, one of those issues which cannot be answered until everybody agrees on the terms. You know, what are the terms that we're discussing here, because people will use the terms in such entirely different ways, and my own feeling about this is that until one is dealing with a society which truly is dedicated to protecting its weakest and to providing sustenance for each individual, so that each individual may, so that all individuals may achieve their self-realization or actualization, you know, live the kind of lives that will allow them to become their own heroes.
Right.
That everything else to me is largely a tactical kind of decision, you know. And,
wow.
I mean,
that's dangerous. We agree on that point. Hate when that
did
happens.
it again? Oh, no!
Oh, my God.
You know, I was thinking about this just driving to the studio, that there are certain societies, certain cultures, which have certain kinds of stories which structure people's reactions in a certain kind of way, so that they are driven by a need to provide for the weakest and to, you know, provide protection, provide for the safety of their people. And that's not just done as a 9-to-5 job. That's done as a lifelong avocation. That's a behavior which, if certain people in certain cultures didn't manifest that behavior, they would not have an identity, even within themselves.
People fitting together as a community.
So, I'm talking about internally within each individual as well. That individual would not even have an identity, might have a name, but not an identity.
Right, I'm with you.
For example, we were looking at this earlier. Somebody handed this to me in San Luis here just recently. In fact, it was toward the middle of July. Actually, toward the end of the middle of July, or toward the end of July. That doesn't matter. But this is a song. It says, "Old Jack Taylor stole some land," and it goes on to the melody to the tune of E-I-E-I-O. And there's an anatomically correct, looks like an enlarged etching, or engraving rather, of a hog, of a male hog. And it goes into a number of lines here. It says, "Now logging trucks tear up the road, E-I-E-I-O, but the hog can't move 'cause he's overloaded, E-I-E-I-O. With a donut here and a six-pack there. Here a churro, there a taco, everywhere a six-pack with an oink oink here," and it goes on. And this is the kind of thing that in a small community is a very effective pressure valve, because what it's doing is it's making fun of the sheriff, who is apparently,
on the wrong side.
Well, and not only that, but the Pueblo chieftain just reported that he was kicked out of the police training school, which he would have to have attended in order to be certifiable. So he's not certified, so he currently can't draw a paycheck, nor is he capable, he told us recently, of even handing out a parking ticket.
Right.
And the undersheriff is now fulfilling the sheriff's responsibilities, and this guy has been refusing to, investigate the weight limits, to just put out portable scales and test the weights on these logging trucks that are tearing up people's roads, cracking, causing, 100-year-old adobe houses to crack and move on their foundations. And somebody has written a song. Apparently, somebody in the community has written a song and handed it out in the traditional corrido format. Though the song is not a corrido, and it's using Old MacDonald Had a Farm, but it's the old tradition of handbills, of songs going out on handbills, and mocking this individual. And seeing if that mockery doesn't work, if the public mockery doesn't change the behavior, if they don't start, dealing with the trucks, then in terms of the community's psychology, they have a right to take the next step. What they're appealing to, let me connect this now. What they're appealing to is what in our culture we call vergüenza, shame, which is a different kind of concept. A person is kept from performing certain kinds of behaviors in the community because they would have vergüenza. You see, the whole community would look at them and know that person should be avergüenzado, should feel this emotion, this feeling. And if they don't, then they are a sin vergüenza, shameless. To be sin vergüenza means to lack the ability to function in civilized society, because the regulator of vergüenza should keep your behavior appropriate to the needs of that community.
Right.
And now what you're talking about in terms of people seemingly offering jobs, just doing the capitalist thing, which would actually allow them, they say, well, I'm a businessman, I'm utilizing a previously unutilizable sector of the labor force.
Right.
Giving opportunities to the labor pool, we can go on with all the rationalizations, but when we understand, if the society itself had the proper human values, which it claims to have, but if it really had those human values, nobody would even be able to do such exploitation, because there would be such a strong sense of vergüenza within them. The community would look at them with such disdain because they have been so avergüenzados. And if they don't change their behavior in order to relieve themselves of the burden of that shame, then they're sinvergüenzas.
The interesting thing about all of that is, I think, the response of Mayor Giuliani, because he was ashamed.
Well, there you go.
When it broke,
boy.
he was ashamed.
Uh-huh.
So, and that was how he reacted.
Uh-huh.
Was that something had to be done because this is a shameful situation. It was embarrassing to him and his city. So now the fact that they don't mind if people are, not deaf and mute. The other cases the Red Cross refers to, that where they're called in to just help people survive. Clearly the mayor doesn't feel enough shame. He is more often shameless.
Oh yeah, and the nature of the shame that he's expressing also is more of a pro forma kind of deal.
Yeah.
It has to do with look, we know that we exploit people, but you've taken this just a little too far.
The line.
Yeah.
You crossed that line.
Yeah. So it's
wherever
a line.
it is.
Yeah, it's a line.
Magical line.
And it's funny to conjecture about just exactly where is that line. Because what we see basically is that if here it's because of the general paternalistic attitude that is held toward people with certain kinds of physical disabilities, right? There, for example, around blind folks, there's two major organizations. There's something called the Association for the Blind, and then there's the National Federation of the Blind. And this Association for the Blind, for example, promotes these little short canes and promotes people tapping
Right.
in order to find their way around. Well, they don't need to tap for the sake of orientation and mobility. The reason for tapping is the same reason that lepers used to carry bells.
Yeah.
It's to warn people, hey, there's something going on behind you, and turn around, and then you get out of the way of this person who's flailing this short cane around. Whereas the National Federation of the Blind, they promote use of a long, flexible, frequently foldable stick, which is maybe 5 feet long, maybe even a little longer, something like 2 paces long.
Uh-huh.
And that stick will fold up like one of those elastic cord tent poles,
right,
where you pull them off the sleeve and fold them up.
Yeah.
And they're taught to use roughly about a 45 degree in front of them sweeping motion, just glancing off the surface in order to test basically all parts of the surface as they walk into it. And then through this sweep, they're able to gently feel whatever's out there.
And avoid an obstacle instead of just warning people.
Exactly. And
to
then
avoid them.
The assumption is made that sighted people will use their sight. And notice what's within a couple arms' reach of them. And frankly, anybody who does have sight, who is not using their sight, to be aware of the fact that there is someone approaching them, then they deserve a gentle tap on the heel, as the stick comes by.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's plenty of ways for a sighted person
no harm in that.
to announce their presence, to make their presence known.
Oh, yeah.
And so the point there is that sighted people ought to be looking around. They got eyeballs. What are they using for? I mean, everybody's got eyeballs, but I'm saying they got the vision.
Yeah.
So use it.
But it is an interesting question about where how one approaches those kinds of problems.
Well, of course.
Certainly, disability radio. The perspective of a lot of the guests there is that society does have an obligation to accommodate.
Sure.
So I don't know if we want to get into the strategy for blind accommodation in particular or not. But the question about accommodation becomes significant because if society doesn't have an obligation to provide jobs, then of course it has no obligation to provide accommodation either.
Well, I think that, to me, I don't really make any distinction
the
between the two of them, because the point is that society, if it's to be called a society, in order to be called civilized, I think to earn the title of civilized, has to provide for its not merely its weakest. It has to, or not merely protect its weakest. It has to provide for all of its citizenry in a way which will allow each one of those members to reach their full potential. And so that's really not accommodation for this easily categorizable bunch of folks, which we will just for the sake of conversation call disabled, but rather it has to do with providing the wherewithal for each and every individual, or the opportunity for each and every individual to reach their full potential. And what I see in situations like the one that you've brought up, is people like Giuliani feeling shame, again, because of the motivation of paternalism having to do with people with certain physical disabilities.
And that's a good point.
As opposed to, which is that the association for kind of attitude, which is give them a canes, with a short one, then they can go tap, 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 so we can know they're coming, as opposed to the Federation of the Blind, which is run by blind people who have developed methodologies of orientation and mobility, which are empowering for the person who needs to take advantage of those things.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to other people being exploited as much, or even worse,
well, and that would be the point.
Then they don't do
happens
anything
all the time.
Then they don't do anything. Yeah. And once again, I'm going to keep harping on this, folks, as long as you listen to this show until this issue is over with, because the people there are counting on me. I have relationships, and that's with the logging.
That Leo would be shamed if you didn't say something.
That's going on right now in the San Luis Valley. Now, if that was a community of blind people,
Giuliani would be prosecuting.
Perhaps, perhaps. But as it is, these are folks who basically could take care of themselves wonderfully well, and it's not even a hypothetical issue because they've done it for a long, long, long time, if the state just got off their back. If on the one hand, and if the state regulated the ones who need regulation on the other. Well, and the ones who need regulation right now are this cat, Zach Taylor, whose logging operation, 230 million board feet timber sale of a logging operation, is destroying the watershed, is purposely going out to selected drainages and destroying the watershed that the folks in those communities depend on for their lives and livelihood.
That is evil.
And here it is, well, we're just providing jobs. Yeah, jobs for people from outside of the area, because none of the locals are willing to cut the trees, and they're not around industrial logging. They've done sustainable logging for generations out there, but never anything on the scale of this current industrial logging.
It's true. Some people need to get involved, because those communities are going to be destroyed. I mean, you can't survive without water. That's the whole point.
Exactly.
And that's the primary loss right there.
And here we have the issue once again. Where is that line between illegal and immoral? Well, obviously, what can be an eminently moral act can frequently be considered an immoral act, and a lot of flat-out immoral acts are frequently totally legal. Now, part of the reason for that, in terms of common law, is that it is assumed that certain kinds of behaviors will generate such a degree of vergüenza in the community that there's no need to have laws around them.
Capitalism has no shame.
That's
what it comes down to.
And here we have a problem. That how do we deal with that? How do we have people out there who are listening now be able to go beyond merely understanding what we're talking about? Because I'm sure that our listeners understand.
Oh, yeah.
There's an illegal and immoral.
It's a KGNU audience, after all.
After all, and they are in the new.
In the new.
Yeah, well, it's like no, only Q, because it's GNU.
I'm with you.
So what can they do? Well, perhaps they could get into activities. What if they generate activities? What if, once again, we bring back vergüenza? What if you folks who are listening out there think about really clever ways to, publicly shame and humiliate and let these politicians and other people know that they're not immune, that when they punch out or when they leave their office, at 5 o'clock, that the reality of their behavior, the effects of their behavior continue to live on in the community which they must live and travel in. And the community should let them know at every opportunity, in the line at the supermarket.
That's good. I think that's a real good idea. We should have come up with that weeks ago.
Weeks ago.
What the?
Leave their kids alone. Leave their kids alone.
Well, no, yeah, I mean, it's not their fault. Of course.
Of course. We have to do that. I think that near the home, though, is appropriate.
Well, it's true. There is no shame. Capitalism has
mean,
no shame. We have to bring shame back into our society.
An individual should not be able to perpetrate genuinely shameful, immoral acts and go and hide
and make
behind
money.
the walls of a gated community.
Yeah.
They should not be able to buy a space around them. They should not be able to hide behind the skirts of others. They should not be able to hide behind the lunchbox of their children as well.
Yeah.
But we've got to be, if anybody goes and does anything, you got to remember that you've got
to be creative.
You've got to be creative.
Humor's good.
And
Use
also
humor.
you must also keep in mind morality.
Yeah. Well, that's the point after all.
You
Self-destructive if you don't.
Can't very well go around saying, have them be immoral or get moral and you be immoral.
But that's a good tactic for confrontation, because it's a particular, it's a creative kind of confrontation, because it demands that you think creatively about what it is that bothers you about, that something that some business, corporation, or politician has done, and then to creatively construct a way of mocking them. Such as using Old MacDonald at a farm and
you certainly
and changing the words.
You certainly can't. Whoever did that certainly deserves accolades.
Very creative.
And I guess that it's just about that time. You know what time that is?
Oh no, it's the time the funny music starts. I always worry about that time. Funny,
there it is.
Strange music.
It's that strange music again. Who thought of that stuff? Well, folks, I guess that what we started out with is people behaving shamefully, and what we've ended with is the idea that we should make their shame known to the world.
Damn straight.
And we agreed.
Well, just this once. Oh, we need to give out the comment line.
Oh yeah, what's the comment line?
447-9911. We'd appreciate your feedback there, and we also have email, at least when Leo's computer's working.
Oh, now you told them where it is.
Well,
we're trying to sound all like really impressive.
Someone they know someone's reading the email. I mean, that's the you're not just sending it out. Someone's reading it.
OCOTL
at AOL.com.
Only it may change because I just heard on the news that they're going to be selling their subscribers list to telemarketers, and we get enough of that stuff as it is. That's crazy.
So, but at least for the next week, you can count on that.
And also, I tell you
we're
what,
shorting out here.
Hey, if you want a copy of Old Jack Taylor Stole Some Land, I think we can do that for you.
Well, yeah.
The song?
Okay.
So send a self-addressed stamped envelope inside another envelope to KGNU. It's right there in the phone book. You know how to do that. And also reach us on the computer line there at OCOTL, at AOL.com. And tell us you want Old Jack Taylor Stole Some Land, and we should be able to get that to you as well. But, send a self-addressed stamped envelope to the radio station. Do it that way.
That's Post Office Box 885 in Boulder, 80306.
Well,
thanks for listening.
Have fun.
You can catch Richard and Leo next Sunday at 5:30 here on KGNU Boulder. Tune in to see if they will agree again, which will be 2 in a row, guys. So, up next is the BBC NewsHour, and after that, the latest in hip-hop news and music with Chris Nathan and his crew, whoever he happens to bring on in here to bring you hip-hop. So, stay tuned to KGNU Boulder 88.5.